helps to, on a regular basis, revisit fundamental principles of work. And not just of work, of any endeavor that you put your mind to. And in today's episode, we are going to revisit two fundamental principles. These are my personal principles that I hold. And you're welcome to take these and use them for yourself however you want to. You can publish them. I hold no copyright over these by any means. Principles are, by their nature, a truth that you could test and evaluate for yourself. Now, it should be clarified that these are theories, not necessarily proofs. So they are not necessarily scientific truths in the formal sense, but they're principles of operation for me that have worked well in my career so far. So the two principles we're going to cover, we're going to start with the first one. And I'll tell you up front, this one is not a very marketable principle because it doesn't really roll off the tongue very well. But the principle goes something like this. Almost all imaginable ideas are possible, and so most of our discussions are not about possibility, but rather about strategy. Let me say this a different way. Pretty much anything you can come up with is possible to accomplish. Now, it may not be possible with some constraint that you have. You may not be able to do it with that amount of money or in that certain amount of time. But the vast majority of the implementations or states, if you want to think about it that way, the vast majority of these future product states or future software states are possible. So when we get in a room with our team, or when we get in a room with an investor, or we get in a room with a product person, with a stakeholder, with a customer, the discussion is not about whether or not it's possible to do the thing that's being asked about in almost every case. Instead, the discussion is about the how. And how is related to strategy in almost every case as well. So why does this matter? Well, this is actually a kind of a version of the principle, everything depends on context. This is something that we say very often as software engineers, especially managers. We like to kind of lean on the idea of context as the determining factor of whether, for example, a particular code base is of a high enough quality, or if we've tested it well enough, or if it's ready for production. We always lean on this. It's almost quippy to say, well, it depends. Everything depends. Well, what does it depend on exactly? The truth is, most presented ideas, most conceptual ideas are possible with the "it depends" clause. Why is this principle important to us on a day-to-day basis? Really, what this does is it underscores the importance of choice. The importance of choice. You as an engineer and you as a manager, you as a product manager, whatever your role is in your job, the most critical underlying common action that we all take is we make choices. And those choices are what make up what we make possible. I want to clarify what I mean when I say that anything that we can conceive of virtually is possible. This is a assertion about the world and about kind of scientific reality. We almost always bring assumptions to the table. And this principle is a reminder that we tend to view the world through the lens of some set of assumptions. And additionally, that our assumptions may hold us back from agency or from various choices. Once we can peel back the assumptions that we're making, once we take off that default lens and we give ourselves more freedom in our strategy, we can then make more intentional decisions to constrain our actions more intentionally. So instead of starting with a limited set of options, we start with many more options. Maybe not all of the options, but as many as we can. And this may impact our choices. For example, one of these simple assumptions that we make is that some implementation, for example, let's say a piece of software, some company outcome, maybe. These are things that we must accomplish by the time that we are done engaging with the project. We rarely think about our engagement ending, but the project continuing. And there's many ways that our engagement could end. Most people can imagine strategizing for a project that continues on after they leave a company. But what about a project that continues on after you die? These are the kinds of relatively uncomfortable assumptions that we can question, we can peel back and approach from a different angle, perhaps for the first time. We're going to take a quick sponsor break, and then we're going to come back and talk about the second back to basics principle for today's episode. This episode is sponsored by Neo4j. Is your code getting dragged down by joins and long query times? The problem might be your choice of database. You could simplify it potentially by using a graph database, which allows you to model data the way it might actually look in the real world instead of forcing it into rows and columns. You can stop asking or forcing relational databases to do more than they were made for. Graphs work well for use cases with lots of data connections like supply chains, fraud detection, real-time analytics, and generative AI. With Neo4j, you can code in your favorite programming language and against any driver. Plus, it's easy to integrate with your existing tech stack. People are solving some of the world's biggest problems with graphs. And now it's your turn. Visit neo4j.com/developer to get started. That's NEO, the number 4, J.com/developer. NEO4j.com/developer. Thanks again to Neo4j for sponsoring today's episode of Developer Tea. That last principle was a little bit heavy, I'll say, at the very end there. And we're going to lighten it up a little bit. Well, this is definitely one of everybody's favorite principles. And we're going to kind of dig back into this one because it is so important. And it's so often forgotten, so often missed. The importance of focus. The importance of focus. What is it that we're talking about when we say focus? Well, it starts with clarity. It starts with clarity. You cannot have focus if you do not have clarity. And we can use the metaphor that's kind of implied here of a lens. If a lens is blurry, if it's smudged, if the clarity of the lens is poor, for whatever reason, maybe the lens itself is hazy, then the lens will not be able to focus. Or if it does, it's going to focus on some artifact rather than the thing itself. Similarly, it is absolutely possible to have clarity, but then it becomes pretty clear, it becomes obvious that you're lacking focus. So this is the important thing to pull out from this principle. Start with clarity in order to gain focus. Think about this for a second. Start with clarity in order to gain focus. What does that actually mean? Well, focusing without gaining clarity is going to be a fool's errand. And this isn't just true for lenses, it's true in your software engineering or any other kind of intense knowledge work that you're going to be doing, any kind of writing, for example, reading. Most activities, honestly, that humans undertake, if you do not have clarity, then attempting to focus is going to be a fool's errand. Why is this? What are we talking about when we say clarity? For the sake of this, for the sake of this principle, we want to use clarity as an explanation of the broader picture, an explanation of the broader picture. What does this actually translate to in our work? Clarity might translate to understanding the list of things that you might prioritize. Understanding, okay, I have, project A, project B, project C. Here are the benefits of doing each of these things. Maybe here's the risk, here's the cost, here's the trade-offs that we're considering. Here are the reasons why this project is even on the board in the first place. Project D has been left out, and here's the reason that Project D has been left out, right? So what we're talking about here is gaining a picture of the broader circumstance or the broader kind of landscape, if you want to call it that. We're going to include something in clarity that goes beyond just seeing clearly. We're going to include thinking clearly about your goals or about your motivations. So it might be a good start to get a clear picture of what's in front of you. But in order to determine a focus, right? In order to determine a focus, you need to be clear about your motivation. You need to have absolute clarity about what you're trying to end up with, what your outcomes are, what you care about doing or affecting in the world. So if you have clarity on, once again, project A, B, and C, and you have clarity on what you expect their impact to be, maybe you have some idea of the risks involved, you have some idea of the investment, etc. Whatever your many different things that you know about this picture are. But you may not necessarily know, okay, which one of those actually takes me towards what I want? Which one of them actually accomplishes my motivations? That is a part of the picture of clarity that is needed. It's possible, for example, that you don't yet know which of the projects is going to take you towards your motivations because you're not really sure what your motivations are. In this case, you're going to create clarity. You're going to find clarity. You're going to make it happen. You're going to consciously choose with the understanding that you're going to find your motivations through this choice. That's one possible way to create clarity. You may say, you know what, we're going to choose based on some other heuristic, some other method of making the choice of what we're going to focus on. We're going to choose Project B because the people that we've talked to are most excited about it. And our kind of local motivation, maybe not our global, forever motivation, but our motivation for this choice is to engage in a project that the people doing the project are excited about. Now, you'll notice that we're not doing any kind of MBA analysis here on which of these is a good strategy or bad strategy. That's not the goal of this episode. Instead, having clarity is the first step to having focus. If you do not have this clarity, your focus will be useless. Now, what the clarity has created is an unquestionable priority. I want you to read what I'm saying here very carefully. I'm not saying that you should not question the priority. Instead, what I'm saying is it is absolutely clear what the priority is. This is the outcome of clarity. The outcome of clarity is to understand in the business context, right? We're not saying that clarity, at a macro level, the only outcome from clarity is to organize your priorities. That's not what we're saying. But in the business context, in your role at your job or in your career, gaining clarity is about understanding from an active perspective, right? Clarity, if it's not active, if it's not informing your actions, then clarity is only marginally useful. But if you're using the things that you're getting clarity about to inform your actions, then your actions are informed by providing you with absolute clarity on priorities. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So now that you have your clarity of priority, now you can engage in focus. Now you can engage in actively pushing out distraction. because you know what you're supposed to focus on. You know because the priorities are incredibly clear. These two things go hand in hand. Clarity is a critical first step to focus. If you do not have clarity, then you will not have any meaningful focus. Now, why is this a principle? Why does it work out this way? Well, if you have an organizational structure where clarity is not provided, let's say, for example, that every day your priorities are shifting in unpredictable ways. Well, now it's very hard for any teammate to tune their focus to the new priority of the day. So what tends to happen is people will tune on something else. They'll tune on, let's say, the things that they think are important. Or they might tune on what they think is going to get them a promotion. They may tune on, they may tune their focus on what they believe their boss wants on any given day. Or maybe they tune into the things that are most technically interesting, or that provide them the most kind of personal fulfillment. All of these are likely not what they would tune to if there was clarity. So this is why this is a principle. Start with clarity, move to focus. You cannot have focus without clarity. And as kind of an addendum, having clarity is not the same thing as having focus. It is a precursor, but just because priorities are clear does not mean you have developed the ability to focus. This is not something that people are born with. It's not something that teams just intuitively pick up on their own. You have to practice and develop focus over time. And usually focus is enabled by revisiting clarity over and over and over. There are many more principles that I will likely dive into as we move forward with Developer T. We can never get enough of these principles. They are so critical to my work, and I believe that if you apply them in your work, you will likely see a positive return on these models of thinking, these principles of thinking. Thanks so much for listening. And of course, a huge thank you to Neo4j. If your code is getting dragged down by a ton of joins and long query times, try simplifying the complexity with graphs. With Neo4j, you can code in your favorite programming language and against any driver. See what graphs can do for you at neo4j.com/developer. That's neo4j.com/developer. If you enjoyed this episode, come and join us in the Developer T Discord community. Head over to developert.com/discord to join totally free today. We'd love to discuss your principles more in depth and talk about ways that you have tested your principles, ways that you might test these ones that we've talked about on the show today. That's developert.com/discord. Of course, another way you can show that you appreciate this show is by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, enjoy your tea.